And joining us from Melbourne is Interns Australia National Policy Director, Clara Jordan-Baird. Clara, now you're not a huge fan of this potential internship program. Exactly why is that?
No, I'm not a fan of it, and the main reason comes down to the way that it treats the role of an intern. So currently, over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen a massive growth in internships across Australia. It's a great phenomenon if you've got a well-paid, well-structured internship, but it's not so great when all the intern does is get coffees, do admin work, essentially the role of a paid worker. The problem with this scheme is it doesn't seek to fix any of those problems. What it does is it creates 120,000 new interns and makes it very unclear what those rights are. So instead of fixing a problem, it's taking it and putting it on steroids.
Now, before I got my first media job though, I did a couple of unpaid internships and I definitely think they're actually worthwhile. Is there not some merit in encouraging employers to take on interns?
The problem is when you do an internship and it's not what you signed up for. So ultimately you think that you're going to be, writing briefs or you're going to be learning a lot about the world you're in, but instead you're getting coffees and you're getting dry cleaning. I think what we need to see is a way of rewarding the good internships and making sure that the bad internships are weeded out. That's why one of the things Interns Australia calls for is an inquiry into the status of interns, having a proper, thorough look at how internships should be regulated.
One of your criticisms is that this creates a situation where companies don't really necessarily need to hire people at entry-level work. They can just have intern after intern after intern across the year. Can you explain to us exactly how you think that's going to play out in a negative sense?
Well, ultimately, if you have a look at the way the scheme is built, an employer gets about $1,000 for taking on one of these interns. So they're going to get to keep the intern does some work, and then obviously the intern might be hired, in which case the employer gets another, I think, $6,500. After another 29 weeks, they then can choose to let the intern go, or if the intern gets let go through no fault of their own, they go straight back on Centrelink benefits. So there's quite a lot of incentives built into this scheme. So if you were an unscrupulous employer, why wouldn't you take on an intern, have them for a small period of time, let them go so that they weren't good enough, and then take on another intern, get the bonus again, and then just wait for that to continue.
That aside, I suppose companies do have to put resources into training interns when they come in. Is there not an argument to say that they should be compensated for that type of work?
One of the things that Australia really consider most dearly is the idea of a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. If you look at any entry-level job, there's always a bit of training that's involved. It's very rare that you get someone who's completely 100% suited to the task. I think one of the worst things about internships too is that quite often they're dangled before these really new vulnerable workers with the promise that a job might follow. So these unpaid workers will stay in positions where their rights are really being exploited because they're desperate for that job.
I'm curious, what are the countries that you think are doing a really good job in this space, that they're making sure that interns aren't being ripped off? Who should we be looking to as an example for this?
I think if you see France, in about 2006, they tried to take away even more rights of interns and there was a massive backlash. So now there are quite a few interns which are obligated under French law to be paid a stipend, so that's better than most. In places like the US and Europe, they're far further down the track than somewhere like Australia, and it's only now we're starting to see interns fighting back.
Now, in your role at Interns Australia, you no doubt hear the gripes of many a disgruntled intern. What is the most amount of internships that you've heard of one single person doing? And what point do you just go, stop, this profession is not for you, you need to give up, just give up?
That's an interesting question. Look, I have heard sort of stories of 5 or 6 internships before, people desperately going through internship to internship. I think what was most interesting for us was that according to our research, about 50% of interns have done 2 internships or more. So the idea that these internships are directly leading to jobs is really just not the case. And our research also demonstrates that if you are doing an unpaid internship, about 20% of those interns will be offered a job.
Clara Jordan-Baird, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thanks very much.